Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our panel on key strategies for scaling the market. My name is Nina Pinette. I'm the manager of GHG offsets and reporting at TÜV SÜD-America, formerly Ruby Canyon Environmental, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. I'm an environmental scientist with over 15 years of experience in GHG emissions inventory and carbon offset project verification. And at TÜV SÜD, I lead teams that are validating and verifying carbon offset projects and emissions reports across North America and globally, working with a wide range of clients in a variety of programs and a variety of sectors. And it becomes clear that voluntary and compliance markets are evolving rapidly as corporate commitments and programs like CORSIA drive credit purchases. So scaling the market to support these net zero goals requires navigating key challenges such as policy and regulatory uncertainty, capacity constraints, and market transparency and infrastructure. So in this session today, we're going to explore some of the main challenges and potential solutions for scaling the market successfully, including new technologies, operational hurdles, and efforts to promote greater standardization across crediting frameworks. We'll also discuss how technology can be leveraged to streamline project monitoring, reporting, and verification, as well as how strengthening market infrastructure and ensuring transparency and integrity can support the market growth. So I'd like to start with brief introductions from our panelists, and then we'll get into our discussion, and then finally at the end, we'll open it up to questions from the audience. So Carlos, let's start with you.
Great, thank you. My name is Carlos Cordova. I am the director for the Americas for Environmental Solutions at S&P Global. Our main work is environmental registries and meta registry for countries and standards around the world. We mainly focus on digitalization of credits in the area of carbon, biodiversity, and water. So thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Awesome. Hey everyone, my name is Travis Croft. I'm a program manager at the Climate Trust. And the Climate Trust is a nonprofit project developer established in 1997. We focus on three main areas of project development, all nature-based projects, so improved forest management, reforestation, and avoided conversion of grasslands. We have an active portfolio of offsets from the projects that we develop, and most of them are under CAR or ACR's protocols. So excited to be here today.
Great, and my name is Marion Verles. I'm the CEO and co-founder of SustainCERT. SustainCERT is a climate impact verifier powered by a digital platform. So we've been pioneering digitally enabled verification for 6 years now. Prior to founding SustainCERT, I had the privilege of being the CEO of the Gold Standard Foundation, and I've been working in carbon markets for a long time. Sometimes I'm thinking far too long, but...
Great. Well, thank you all for those introductions. I think we'll start off with kind of a fundamental question, I think, on this topic, and go from there. So what do you think are the most significant barriers currently preventing the carbon market from scaling effectively? I guess, Carlos, let's start with you.
Good.
Thank you.
I think one of the most significant barriers is fragmentation. You know, many registries and standards that we have right now operate in silos with no common data language or framework. This lack of interoperability, leads to inefficiencies, double counting risk and limited visibility across markets. And often, overlooked challenges is the readiness of national systems. Many emerging markets want to participate, but they lack the digital infrastructure and capacity to scale effectively. That's where we see a transformative opportunity where S&P Global's Meta Registry or Expansive Connect or CATRAS from the World Bank is built to connect this system, enabling end-to-end traceability across different registries and standards. By linking these ecosystems, they will help reduce fragmentation, enhance transparency, and unlock market growth with integrity.
Great, thanks. Let's continue on, Travis.
Awesome, yeah. Prepping for this, I was like, we must be the first panel ever to contemplate this question, right? How to scale carbon markets. So thinking on it, one of the big challenges that I see, and kind of speaking from the project developer perspective, is really communicating a lot of the complexities that come with each project. And so, carbon markets cover such a wide variety of sectors, from nature-based to industrial projects, and we have buyers looking at all of them. And it's impossible to be an expert in all of them at any one time. And so I think that, when we're looking and talking at, for example, forest carbon projects, you really need to understand the intricacies of timber market dynamics and what the growth rates are of those, specific trees and species and things like that. So there's a lot of communicating and educating that the carbon market has to do in order for a buyer to truly understand what that impact is of the project. And so, in the last several years, we've seen developments like integrity initiatives and rating agencies and pushes for higher quality credits. And I think one of the challenges that comes with that too is, if we're gonna rate and judge projects, we need to make sure that we have the right expertise and the correct backgrounds in order to do that. And those ratings need to be consistent and comparable. And so, I think that just considering all of these factors sort of collectively is one of the barriers to scaling the carbon market, where we have a lot of experts in a lot of different project types, but figuring out exactly what the impact is at an individual project level can be a challenge.
Yeah, and adding to that, I think I agree that with Travis and Carlos that the market has some inefficiencies and can be optimized. That's clear, and very happy to talk about how we can do that. I do, however, believe that the main barrier to scaling this market relates to the demand. There's just not enough demand out there. I mean, let's put it that way. It's the reality that we face right now. Look at 2023 and 2024 retirement levels. There hasn't been any growth. And market participants were happy to see that there wasn't a decline. So that's the reality we face. Last year in 2024, there were 1,500 projects roughly that issued carbon credits. This is a tiny market. And the reason why there aren't more projects issuing credits is because there's not more demand for those credits. And so why do we not have the demand that we were hoping for? First, because from a voluntary perspective, there's no clarity on the business case. There's no alignment from civil society on what you can claim or do with your carbon credits. I think the Science-Based Target Corporate Net Zero Standard version 2.0 is going in the right direction. It's creating a use case there for BVCM after really a few years of debates and disagreements. So we're seeing progress there. But for me, the future of the market is really regulatory. We need to see governments implement Article 6.4, sending demand signals for Article 6.4 units, and then the supply and the infrastructure will come.
Great. Well, thank you all. I'd like to give Carlos and Travis an opportunity to respond, but, anybody comments if you would like?
I can jump in.
Yeah.
I think one thing I feel is important is for the market participants here, and NACW is a great showcase of this. We've got project developers and registries and verifiers, rating agencies. The whole spectrum is here, and I think it's really critical that we have in some way, shape, or form a unified voice of the positive impact that the carbon markets can have. We need all hands on deck to mitigate climate change, and we know that this is a viable way to drive much needed investment into projects that have a measurable and significant impact. So not to say that there isn't room for improvement, there will always be, but I think we really need to focus on celebrating successes and recognizing that there's a lot of groundbreaking work that's happened that's not only worth celebrating but worth replicating. And so I think if we can all sort of carry that torch in some way, then it'll trickle down into the demand aspects where buyers won't be shy to purchase a carbon credit because they'll be aware of all the really great benefits that come with it.
Yeah, just one more thing to add is we all are in the carbon markets, right? So if the carbon markets succeed, we're all winning, So as long as we make sure there is traceability, transparency, and interoperability in everything that we do, that will make a big deal with buyers because they will have that reliability and trust in the market, which we will all benefit, and it will also benefit the market. So that's something that we need to make sure we keep that in mind.
Great. Well, yes, thank you all for your insights. I think you've highlighted some very critical barriers that are currently facing the market. And I think as we look ahead, groups and individuals are expecting to see the demand grow for credits, as there's the various programs, in compliance markets. So I think despite some of these challenges, that's kind of the expectation. And I guess in consideration of that, how do you see the market evolving over the next, 5 to 10 years to meet these expected increases in demand? I guess, Carlos, let's start with you.
We're likely to see a convergence of voluntary and compliance markets alongside a surge in national registries and Article 6 related infrastructure. As demand grows, buyers will expect more than just a credit. They will want visibility into origin, quality, and impact. That futures requires smarter, interoperable systems. Our company and many other companies in the market are already seeing the need of real-time, verifiable data, and that that is there, and that is decided to support, a unified view of credit status and a movement across jurisdictions and standards. With this ecosystem where the buyer can see the whole picture, it will give them more credibility to the market. It's about more than just scaling volume. It's about scaling trust.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I guess Travis, Marion, anything
Yeah.
you'd like to add?
Yeah, I'd love to contribute to that. So maybe just to go back to the barrier of demand. We've been waiting for demand to pick up forever. I mean, since I joined the market in 2008, we've been saying that demand would materialize at a scale it never has. And so for us, the lesson learned is that there's only so much a corporate is going to do voluntarily. That's it. Those voluntary budgets are limited in nature. So unless we see a compliance-driven demand, it's not going to scale. On the future of the market, I agree with Carlos that the future of the market is digital. So what does that mean? It means a market where the rules of the game will have to be different, because digitizing carbon markets, and speaking maybe from the verification perspective or the project life cycle, what you see is that to fully unlock the power of new technologies, including AI, digital data capture, or even digital verification, we need to change the rules of the game. The current level playing field was written for auditors going to the field, taking the size of a tree, looking at meters, and checking boxes. If you digitize that, then you may not need to have an auditor go on the ground every year. You may not need to have an actual PDF issued as a verification report once every 12 months, because technology can do that for you. But right now, in the documentation, in the standards, in the accreditation bodies, it is written that you have to send a verification report. So we are in a situation where the technology is there to unlock real-time verification and issuance of carbon credits, but the current rules of the game require us as verifiers to still create PDFs and send those PDFs via emails. And so unless we have a new playing field with rules that are written for digital monitoring, reporting, and verification, we're not going to get there. So that's one of the thing we need to unlock going forward, is working together with the accreditation bodies, the VVBs, the programs, to create that new level playing field. And the other thing that we need to do, I fully agree with Carlos, is make sure that interoperability is there by design. And right now, and I think it's natural because it's the early phase of the digitization of the market, we're seeing many isolated initiatives pop up, but those are not connected. And so that further increases the issue of fragmentation, which is slowing down progress. So by making sure that we have interoperability there by design from the beginning, we can accelerate the speed at which we digitize the market. Yeah.
Yeah, I would just add, I think on the sort of buyer's perspective as well, you know, there's this sort of natural pairing of a lot of different project types to choose from, and a lot of different industries that are looking to source credits. And so, you know, what I think this maturing market is enabling is companies to have the ability to shop around and pick from project types that resonate with them. Surely price points are a big factor of that, but, you know, there's a wide array of nature-based to industrial projects and a lot of strategies where you combine all of them into a portfolio, right, to kind of distribute that impact. And I think what we're kind of starting to see, and we'll probably see more of going forward, is a notion of consolidation in the market where certain project developers are able to find their niche and really hone in on certain protocols and project types, and with that, the registries that are supporting them. And I think that will eventually, you know, improve efficiency and the scale at which we can like deploy and develop these projects. And I think that in a lot of sectors, we're moving beyond pilot projects. We're rolling out entire programs, we're issuing credits. These are meaningful revenue streams to landowners. And so we're no longer talking about this, you know, nascent concept, but it's a market that's functioning. And I think that's really important to make clear to buyers and to landowners who are, you know, maybe just kind of exploring carbon markets for the first time. And with that, there's, you know, avoidance and removals credits, and definitely a market trend towards more removals that I think we've all seen. And, you know, myself and the Climate Trust for sure thinks that, you know, avoidance credits are still very important. You know, protecting an intact tree and an intact grassland and preventing the loss of those, you know, specifically natural carbon sinks is as important as, you know, supporting restoration on degraded lands. And so, you know, from a supply perspective, we have the ability to supply more avoidance credits now, and that is really critical finance to continuing the project in the long term, and will also help eventually set up a more robust supply of removal credits. So I think it's really important that that balance is still struck, and that, you know, there isn't just a full commitment to removals only.
Great, thank you all. You know, I think Marion talked about digital MRV as a, you know, potential technology solution and, you know, improvement for the market and, you know, making the process more efficient. I guess, you know, as we think about other technological solutions, you know, do you think of any other technologies, you know, that could potentially contribute, you know, to helping scale the market? Either Carlos or Travis.
No, I think technology allows us to embed integrity into MRV processes from the ground up. You know, tools like remote sensing, like Pachama is doing, digital MRV platforms, and automation can reduce delays and human error while increasing rigor. You know, but this only works if the data flows across system. That's what we need to have, make sure that all of the systems, they connect with each other and they talk to each other. You know, that's what we are at S&P and other companies in the market. They are trying to build registries that have interoperability built at their core, you know, to not only connect MRV inputs with registry actions, but also ensure, again, I repeat this word, traceability throughout the project life cycle. You know, the goal is not just to digitalize MRV, but to make transparency a built-in feature in the system. You know, that's something like we know. I wanted to like portray this. You know, make sure transparency is a built-in feature in the system, because that will give confidence in the market.
I can go. Yeah, I think that we're in a stage now where carbon credits are a pretty complex commodity. You know, what a buyer sees might just be a project ID or a series of serial numbers and maybe a little tagline that says retired on behalf of, right? But those are just the tip of the iceberg. The carbon project itself has a lot more impacts to it that in a lot of ways maybe don't even need to be quantified for the carbon project. And so I think that, you know, technology, remote sensing and more digital tools will allow us to quantify a lot of co-benefits that we talk about quite often, especially with nature-based projects. And I think that's a space I'm really excited about. I think it's been a little bit, you know, tricky. There's a lot of data out there and a lot of good data that can back this up. But finding the sources that are trusted and that we can use time and time again, I think that's kind of been a hodgepodge. There's sort of like, you know, people pulling different co-benefits data from all over. And so I think some sort of unification of that would be helpful as well. And that certainly bleeds into the concept of biodiversity credits and thinking about a whole separate market-based mechanism there. But I think for now, even just with carbon projects, you know, using that technology can really help to tell the story. And again, kind of tying back to scaling the market and, you know, telling that story to the buyers as saying, you know, hey, there's the carbon benefit and the climate benefit, but there's so much more to go with that. And I think that is, you know, something that resonates pretty well.
So 2 things I'd like to add to the conversation on technology. The first one is that technology is neutral. It's not, by definition, high integrity. Technology is as good as what you make of it. So it's not because you're using digital tools that all of a sudden the quality is going to go up. If you start using digital tools, the potential that we have to increase quality is really high. But that potential will only materialize if we're using it well. And that's why when I'm being told that technology is going to make verifiers irrelevant, that makes me smile, not because I want to have a job in a few years from now, but because every time someone came to us and told us, Marion, you need to validate our model or verify our model, and then everything that's going to go through the model is going to be considered verified. We've looked at it, and there were always surprises. Models and platforms and black boxes never behave the way you expect them to behave. And unless someone looks under the hood and confirms that the technology is really doing what it's supposed to be doing, then you shouldn't be trusting it just on the face of it. And so that's really important, I think, to keep in mind. And then the second point I wanted to make on transparency, technology and transparency, I agree, transparency is great. But when I buy a yogurt or a piece of cheese, I'm French, right? So we do eat a lot of cheese. I don't want to have to read pages and pages and pages of data of where the milk is coming from and what the cow ate and how much CO2 was in there. I want to be able to trust the brand, right? And we buy things every day. What we want is to be able to trust the brand. So when I'm buying an offset or an environmental commodity, I want to be able to trust the brand so that I don't have to look at all the data that's behind it. And so even with tech and the transparency that it brings, we need strong standards. We need strong brands. That need is not going to go away.
Great. Yeah, any other perspectives on technology? Well, I think, you know, Marion had a good segue, you know, into kind of the next topic that I want to discuss a little bit. You know, so, I mean, technology clearly plays a crucial role. And, you know, we talk about efficiency and, you know, how can we improve efficiency and transparency. But I think, you know, another potential issue is kind of the coordination across markets and across programs. There are all these different registries. There are countries have their own programs, you know, and so I think given the efforts already underway, you know, how can we further enhance the collaboration among these programs and different organizations that are essentially all working towards the same goal? You know, so improving efficiencies there, reducing redundancies, and just encouraging greater standardization across those markets. Thoughts,
No.
I guess, Carlos, yeah.
Yeah, I think collaboration must go beyond dialogue, beyond conversation. You know, it requires shared infrastructure. Right now, there are too many systems are duplicating efforts in creating friction. You know, initiatives like the Meta Registry is one way to break this cycle. You know, it creates a neutral, shared layer of connectivity that allows registries programs to maintain their independence while benefiting from interoperability and market-wide transparency. This kind of infrastructure reduces duplication, encourage convergence, and enable users to make informed decisions with greater confidence in the data that they see.
Yeah, I would say echo a lot of what Carlos said there on the notion of going, collaboration beyond just a dialogue. And I think tying back a little bit to my point earlier about a unified voice, I think that really having that come from the market in general and say, hey, efforts like the ICVCM, certifying certain standards and carrying that as a notion of quality in the market is really helpful. Those are clear signals that we can point to. And in that sense, I think that the registries can collaborate and kind of understand how to navigate these changing policies or standards that the market is sort of demanding. And then one thing I wanted to tie back to just some of the maybe a barrier as well that's sort of related to this on the project development side is, when we're working with landowners and project proponents, they're making a decision at day one of the project to forego different revenue stream in favor of carbon revenue. And so when we have protocols that are being updated and changed over time, that can actually place a lot of risk on the landowner themselves. And so if they're, forgoing potential upside from, a timber harvest in favor of an IFM project, now having a dynamic baseline throws a new twist in there because they can't count on necessarily the same amount of credits that we, would do if we had a more static baseline. Not that that's a bad thing. I do think it makes projects higher integrity, but it does introduce risk, and some of that is now being bared by the landowner, which is a interesting factor. So I think that the market needs to unify and collaborate, and the more that we can be on the same page in terms of registries and what quality looks like, the better. While acknowledging that pushing that definition of quality too far can kill projects and subject more landowners to risk that maybe we weren't thinking about.
Yeah, I agree that collaboration needs to be taken further, and it hasn't happened so far. So my conclusion is that it needs a forcing mechanism. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. Standards aren't going to get at the same table to work out those issues unless there's some sort of incentive or strong forcing mechanism to go there. One of the forcing mechanism could come from the ICVCM. I think it has a lot of leverage and hasn't been using it to its full extent to get standards around the table to agree on some of those core issues. But I think by its nature of being a standard of standards, you're seeing alignment happen that way anyway. On digitization, it's been lacking because every standard is looking at it a different way and creating a new small level playing field that is not compatible with what others are doing, and so that's really hindering progress. Some of the work SustainCERT has been doing with the World Bank is to leverage the World Bank market-making work through the Carbon Market Initiative, CMI. So we've created a working group where we have, I think, most of the standards around the table, key VVBs, VVB Association, and some of the leading market players to see if we can agree on some of the challenges and solutions we want to co-develop to accelerate uptake of digital solutions. But it's still a very small and isolated initiative. We need more of them. But the reality is that, I don't think there's an easy solution to get players around the table working together to co-create the new rules of the game that we need. And that's the main pain point, I would say, also to speak with one voice on some of those issues.
Great.
But Marion, you mentioned the work that the World Bank is doing on the registry infrastructure. That's a very good working group that many of us, including SMP, are doing and are working with them, because it will ensure that the infrastructure is there, that the rules are there, and it will tell others that these are the rules that the big players are doing, and that sends a big message to the
I
world.
agree, yeah.
You know, and that's what we need. You know,
Yeah.
yeah.
Standards are underrepresented there, so I feel. It's like it's their market being shaped by everyone else except them, yeah, which is a bit of a shame.
Yeah, great, great. Yeah, thank you for those insights. You know, I think as we talk about, you know, standardization and collaboration and, you know, the need to have a more cohesive market, you know, we also have to think about the fact that, you know, these markets won't be effective if, you know, we don't have the capacity to implement them. You know, so I think another thought is, you know, what are some of the capacity constraints that are currently existing that, you know, are challenging, you know, the expansion of the market and, you know, things from like the number of project developers and number of projects out there, you know, potentially the number of VVBs. I know we see this personally with my work as a verifier. But yeah, what do you think are some of the most urgent capacity gaps out there, and, you know, what are the best ways that those can be addressed to support the market growth?
So for me, the capacity gap is a consequence of the demand problem, because if you have a strong long-term demand signal, then you can invest and build a capacity that's lacking. But right now, we don't have that. So for verifiers, it's really difficult to start training people. It takes, 9 months to train an auditor? And then how long does it take to become a senior auditor? It takes years. So it's really difficult to invest in manpower if you don't have those strong demand signals. So for me, part of the problem can be solved with strong demand signals, long-term purchase agreements from those corporates, so that the market can start planning ahead and making the investments today that are required to build the supply of tomorrow. With digital technologies, we know that, for example, with the SustainCERT digital verification platform, we know that we can reduce the human power required to do a verification tremendously. It's like huge. You can take every single step of the process and take at least half of the time it takes an auditor, or even more in some cases. So there are ways you can also reduce the level of human power that is required to take a project through the process. But again, it's really difficult to justify those investments if the market is not there. And so that brings us back to demand signals, in my view.
Yeah, I would say that I think the capacity problem is one that we've run into on all sides of the carbon market, and a part of me wonders if it's a factor of trying to maybe wear too many hats. And so back to the idea of market consolidating over time, and project developers finding their niche, and verifiers really understanding what the standards are requiring. And rating agencies being, specialized and fine-tuned to certain project types. I think all of that would collectively, improve efficiency and free up capacity as well. And then I think even maybe more systemically than that, having there be more career pathways into the carbon market, and programs that are targeting recent graduates from universities who are able to participate in an internship or a fellowship, and things like that to bring more people into the market. I think there's a little bit of a lack of that as well. And if there were those sort of clear, even academia routes to go, then maybe some of the training and the time that it takes to become an expert in the field would be reduced, and again, improve efficiency that way.
I think circling back to the restraints of capacity, I think digital readiness is a critical gap. Many national and regional actors want to scale, but do not have the systems or skills to manage complex registry infrastructure. I keep coming back to the infrastructure because I feel that having a good infrastructure is key and base for this. So there's also a growing bottleneck around BBBs availability and standardization. At our company, S&P, and other companies, they are helping address this by providing modular, scalable registry platforms that reduce the burden of implementation. By connecting these systems through systems like I mentioned before, like the Meta Registry or Expansive Connect, they further lower the barriers and support long-term capacity building, both for governments and also the private sector.
Great. And any follow-up thoughts? Just give you an opportunity to respond. No? Well, great. I appreciate all the insights. I think, as you all mentioned, that expanding capacity is really crucial to scaling the market. But I think one of the things that comes up frequently as we think about, pushing for greater scalability, is how do we ensure the integrity of the credits and the programs, and that we don't compromise the integrity in a rush to scale the market and, develop more projects and have more credits issued.
I think.
Whoever
you
wants to
can-
take it.
No, I
Yeah,
think
please go.
we need
Ahead.
to treat integrity as an infrastructure issue, right? Not just as a policy challenge. The only way to scale responsibility, the only way to scale responsibly, is to ensure every credit is traceable, verifiable, and transparently managed from insurance to retirement. That's exactly what the market is trying to do. And that's what the registries that are in the market are trying to embed traceability, at the system level. Just basing that there. So quality is not something added later. It's something built in. And I keep coming back to it has to be built in from the very beginning. This digital backbone enables the market to grow without sacrificing trust, which is all what we want.
I have to disagree with that, Carlos. Come on.
Okay.
The lack of traceability and the lack of digital infrastructure is not why we went through the integrity crisis that we went through, right? That's not related, and I agree that digital infrastructure is part of the solution, but digital infrastructure without strong standards isn't going to yield the quality we need.
No.
And the integrity crisis that the market has gone through is a crisis of methodologies. It's a crisis of how do you establish a baseline, how do you quantify removals and emission reductions. And all the technology solutions of the world are not going to take away from the table the problem of what is a strong baseline in a Paris-aligned world, how do you quantify emission reductions and removals, how do you establish permanence. All those issues are inherently extremely complex. Yeah. And so the integrity crisis is, in my view, starting to get behind us because the ICVCM, VCMI, and other organizations have taken a stand on establishing standards of standards and creating the dialogue around those issues so that we can have consensus. And still, there's some disagreement still, but there's a lot more consensus than we had a few years ago on what is a high-quality credit. We have CCP labels now. We have CORSIA, so we have new quality standards that have emerged. We have the Paris Agreement Article 6.4. And for me, this is the basis on which we can build digital infrastructure and any type of technology are those standards. And if you take a step back, the quality and integrity crisis, in my view, was also directly correlated with the fact that we haven't had a compliance market operating for a long time. The CDM vanished. The market was left to voluntary standards, many of which were facing financial issues because of the crash that we experienced in 2013, 2014. And the quality of the market was left in the hands of really underfunded NGOs with very limited resources. Now that ICVCM has entered the space, that we have more funding through those organizations and that 6.4 is there, we have a new reference benchmark on which we can build a high-quality market. But at the core of the problem is the fact that we're dealing with very, very complex issues. We were talking about this really important tension between standards are expected to update their methodologies very frequently in line with the latest science. And then you have project developers saying, I have my business plan based on a methodology that may change every 2 years. How do I do that? This is really, really complex. And technology is not necessarily the solution to that. Those are complex issues with competing incentives that need to be resolved. And without a central forcing function, like what the ICVCM was doing, I don't think we could have gone through that integrity building process as we did. And it's not perfect, but at least it solved quite a number of issues, in my view.
Yeah, I guess, Travis, you have project developer perspective on some of this?
Sure. Yeah, I would say what I think will help us to not lose sight of quality and integrity as the market continues to grow is having the stops in place to correct the course when we need to. And so we now have a lot more eyes on the scene, quite honestly, a lot more people looking at the various aspects of project development and credit issuance and additionality and baselines and all of that. And so, there's more eyes on it to double check that, if there are issues and there is a need for a protocol update, then we can do that. And so in that sense, I would agree with what Marion said. And, just more stakeholder involvement as well, having, opportunities like this to talk and address issues and convene at NACW and like events to discuss what are kind of the barriers and the hurdles to the market, I think will, help to make sure that we're able to continue to make improvements as needed. And, I think we can all, in our own work lives, strive to be more efficient and to streamline processes. And that's a grand idea that I think everybody would strive for. So if we all just work harder, we'll get there, I think. Kidding. But, continuing to have conversations and address these issues as they come up. And I think that, it's not just the methodologies, but it is the registry, infrastructure. It's really all the stakeholders in play that are gonna, at the end of the day, produce a market that has quality, credits and will last.
I think it's the whole ecosystem, right? It's ICBCM, the project developers they all need to gather together, and make something solid. Now we have in the CCP labels, all these type of labels that are coming up. We have, Vera, ACR and CAR. They're all having all these labels for their projects. Including all of that, that will help the market grow, and that's what we want, and that's what we all are here, because we believe in the market.
And so to build on that, for me, I think what we need is more humility, because at the end of the day, quality is a moving target.
Mm-hmm.
The highest quality protocols that we have today are not as good as the ones we're going to have tomorrow, and they're a lot better than the ones we had yesterday. And we all collectively as a market need to be comfortable with that, because that's the reality. Science keeps progressing, technology keeps advancing, and so there is a continuous improvement process going on. And so quality is a moving target. And no one can say today that he or she has the best solution ever, because tomorrow something better is going to come up. And so we need to be able to embrace that.
And that's something that also come up, now, I don't want to get into that, but then insurance comes into the picture, right? Ratings and insurance. So it's all these add-ons that comes to all those projects, that help the market, have more confidence on all of that, which, insurance is a whole different story, but yeah.
Yeah, it's a complex issue for sure. And I think we've touched on this a little bit, but I think we've covered a lot of the barriers. We've, talked about some of the opportunities and challenges. I mean, I think we could probably talk about this for hours, for days, perhaps. But I'd like to hear from each of you here before we open it up to the audience for questions. What do you think is the single most promising solution or action that could drive meaningful growth in the carbon market? If there's one thing, I guess the audience should take away from this discussion today, what would that be?
So I'd go back to my first, I think one of the things I said first, and I'd love to get questions from the audience, so I'll keep it short. I would say a new level playing field that makes it possible for us to digitize the entire ecosystem. So let's come up with a new rule book that is digitally native.
I would say that I think we need to reach a point of actionable consensus where we trust the protocols and we trust the registries and we trust the project developers. And if we push the bar of quality too far, I think that we are eventually going to kill projects and take away from meaningful finance to actually get to the activity that's mitigating climate change and reducing carbon emissions. So there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen, and I think that will help us establish the infrastructure that we need. But at some point, we need to also, kind of hit the ground running with the projects and trust that what we've, where we are is enough to achieve the impact that we hope to.
I think for me is connectivity. If we want to scale the carbon market globally, we must stop building in silos. We need to allow credits to be tracked, compared, and trusted across systems. If there is one message to take away today, it's that we cannot build a trusted global carbon market on disconnected infrastructure. We need to scale with systems that are transparent, interoperable, and connected. That's how we unlock both growth and credibility.
Great. Well, thank you all for your insights. I guess, now that we've had some time to discuss some of these issues, we'd love to hear from the audience. Are there any questions, thoughts that you'd like to share with our panelists here? I think, is there a microphone? No, okay.
No.
I'll try, yeah, thanks.
My name is Jack. I'm a student writing a thesis on standardizing regulations in international carbon markets. So this was very illuminating, and I appreciate all of your perspectives. I wanted to ask a question on the feasibility of standardizing under Article 6.4. It seems to me, in my view, which could totally be misplaced, that there are two major selling points for the inclusion of offsets in jurisdictional compliance mechanisms. One, that they make it cheaper for corporations to complete or get to their compliance obligations, and two, that the offsets used usually generate revenues for projects within the countries themselves. Given that 6.4 will likely be aligned with or at least come with a significant price premium on the one hand, and that they will be sending offset revenues overseas, what are the political incentives and arguments for regional compliance mechanisms to integrate with the Paris Agreement crediting mechanism?
Thoughts?
So I'm not sure. So when you say, so you're asking what is the business case for a country to let its Article 6.4 units go into another country's compliance market?
No, I'm asking why a country would decide to base a regional compliance, because if we're expecting Article 6.4 demand to be driven by integration
Yeah.
with regional compliance mechanisms, that relies on those regional compliance mechanisms prioritizing 6.4 credits, or at least trying to build their market mechanisms around that.
I think
why should they, and like their domestic political view, choose to operate around a system where credit revenues will be flowing internationally and
Yeah.
will be higher?
I think it's the same business case as what we had with the EU ETS back in the days, where a portion of the credits of the allowances could be sourced via the purchase of CER, so it's flexibility mechanism because the price point is lower. So it's reducing the cost of compliance. I think that's the main business case. Would be my view. Yeah.
Can I ask a follow-on on that? Are there regional compliance standards looking to use Article 6.4 tons?
I mean, Switzerland is using Article 6.2 units, and yeah, we're seeing, I think we saw last year already a couple of European countries put up funds that would be sourcing Article 6.4 units for their own national compliance.
Right. So I guess there's like that difference of, like with national compliance, I think it flows like that, and it's different than if CAR was like allowing Article 6.4 units, because one is sort of a sovereign, not a regional, unless we're just parsing words,
Yeah.
versus, another plank in a sovereign's route to achieving their NDCs.
Yeah.
Other questions? Yes.
Yeah, so my question is around your thoughts on whether the speed of the market would develop faster if we had a higher crisis mentality. And what I think of is, let's say we were all talking about the pharmaceutical market right now, and it takes 7 to 10 years to approve a new drug, right? And we talking about what it's gonna take and all the standards and how we wanna stick to that, and then a, new virus comes along and skip all of those steps and push things forward as quickly as possible. And that's based on that recognition globally of a crisis, which tends to cut through a lot of things. It's true, you might break some quality standards, that you wanna have in those quiet times, but you really move quickly. And I feel like there's this, different people have different expectations of, what constitutes a crisis and a timeline for it. But if we had more of a, consistent view of the crisis nature of what we're dealing with, that some of this discussion would just be, let's figure out how to get past this step as quickly as possible and move things forward. So I'd love to have your thoughts on that kind of crisis mentality or lack of crisis mentality and how it might be affected.
I think it's spot on, to be honest. That's the main problem we face today, that we're not treating the climate crisis as a crisis. And to go back to your example of COVID, I'm not a pharmaceutical expert, but my understanding is that the vaccines that were produced in a record time were actually high quality, and that we managed to compress timelines in a way that no one thought was feasible. And so I think that is the main problem. Yes, we're not treating the climate crisis as a crisis.
But I also think that it needs to be a kind of like a consensus, right? I understand that, crisis mode may help us to move faster and forward, right? But we also want to make sure that all the decisions that are made and all of the rules that are in place are also thought truly, in a good way, Yeah, I agree with you guys. We know the crisis mode will help us push forward, but also we need to be conscious that maybe moving so fast may also give us some delays or some things behind.
Yeah, and I would just add, I think reaching that point of kind of actionable consensus of like, okay, we've got all this infrastructure in place. We have a lot of stops to, make corrections and fix problems if we need to. So I think in my eyes, it seems like the carbon market really is poised to scale and to grow as long as we can instill that confidence.
Other questions? Yes.
I'm Thiago. I work for One Tree Planted, a nonprofit that supports global reforestation. We've seen, talking about the demand, a shift on buyers' perspective, coming into early stage, like to fund projects in an early stage perspective, when they realize that they could avoid the reputational crisis participating of the project development. And SustainCERT created this kind of insetting structure, right, to allow them to work with Scope 3 emissions and changed a bit the way, instead of talking about offsets, credits, carbon claims. So I'm wondering, do you, Marion, think that this is a trend in the market, basically, changing the way carbon projects are structured financially? And because we know like a large slice of the demand is Scope 3 and financial services, food companies, need a lot of claims to offset those emissions.
Yeah, I'm bullish on Scope 3 because I think right now there's more incentives for corporates to act on Scope 3 than to go carbon neutral. So I'm pretty bullish on Scope 3, and I agree that usually, or at least right now, when a corporate is pursuing a Scope 3 trajectory, they have a tendency to get involved earlier on in the project to make sure it's in their value chain, to make sure it's targeting the suppliers or the areas they want to be targeted. So yes, I think that's right, and I would see Scope 3 as complementary and as an opportunity to provide additional demand signals for similar interventions. I think what we need to do is create the conditions for land use, for example, projects to tap into the offset market or the Scope 3 markets, depending on what is better for them. Yeah.
Other questions? Yes.
So
So on the compliance drive, I think in the CDM has created a lot of demand, right? And it's not there. So those projects have transitioned back to the voluntary carbon market or have ceased to exist, basically. And so that's why we are where we are. We haven't seen the demand that we were expecting to see. On the voluntary use case, why are we not letting corporates buy carbon credits to reduce their footprint, right? I think there's a number of reasons for that. The primary reason is a matter of getting on top of your own emissions and taking action to transform your business models towards 1.5 aligned business models and business strategies. And the reality is that there's not enough land, there's not enough forest to offset our global emissions. We need companies to decarbonize, and decarbonization also means changing their business models, changing the type of energy they use, the quantity of energy they use, the type of products they produce. One of our Scope 3 partner has taken on a hugely ambitious Scope 3 target. And they were telling me, Marion, if we want to achieve our Scope 3 target, we need to get out of dairy. We cannot continue to use dairy in our produce the way we do. It's just not going to fly. And they started investing heavily in R&D to develop products that are not based on dairy. And so that's the type of transformation you get when you force corporates to act on their emissions. You don't get that with the offsetting market.
Other questions?
And I'm sorry if there are people from the dairy industry in the room.
What
But,
are we do without dairy?
But that's, that's the hard truth. That's
Yeah.
the reality. And you go to Australia, the meat industry will tell you we don't want our industry to be the next coal. I mean, we need to transform business models and our economy. And it's going to be painful.
I guess I have one follow-up question, Marion. You had mentioned this a couple of times in your remarks, about how, we keep talking about there's this increasing demand, but, is there an increasing demand? And you mentioned compliance programs as a way to potentially create that demand. I mean, do you think any of the current programs are that program to create that demand? Or, what are your thoughts there?
I'm bullish on 6.4. So let's see what comes out of BLM. But I really want and wish, and hopefully we'll see 6.4 succeed and drive the demand we all want. What makes me really excited about Article 6 is also to see, and I agree with you that the level of readiness is not completely there, but African countries really stepping up and getting ready for Article 6. So CDM benefited China and India, Article 6.4. Now is the time for Africa to benefit from carbon markets, and there's a lot going on there. So that's my, that's what I see. Yeah.
Great, thanks.
No.
Yeah, Carlos or Travis, any insights on
No,
that?
I agree with Marion. I mean, I think right now is the time for Africa. I think there is a lot of investment in Article 6.4, and we are seeing this, because African countries are seeing this as an opportunity not only for a source of income, but also as a co-benefits that they will imply through that. So I think, with our current clients, for example, Singapore, they are doing a lot of work with Africa because they see as a potential. African countries see that as a way of revenue and also enhancing their co-benefits. Yeah. So.
Great. Any final thoughts? No? Well, I'd like to thank our panelists today for such a thoughtful discussion, and thank you all in the audience for joining us this afternoon. I know after lunch can be a hard time. So yes, thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Nina.
Thanks, Nina.
Thanks, Nina.